everybody. Welcome back to Beauty and Brains. I am Zuri Dale, and I am here with special guest, entrepreneur, author, coach, mentor, Miss Shuronda Robinson. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, so we actually met at a conference in Austin, and we spoke on a panel together. And your conversation was just so insightful, and I wanted to have a follow-up conversation with you about a very particular topic, and we didn't get a chance to do that. So this is the perfect forum for us to do that. But before we start, okay, I actually want to play a game.
Oh.
Okay. So everybody knows the Beauty and Brains podcast. We intersect beauty, art, science, health, and wellness. And so I want to play a little game, a fun and engaging game with you. And it's going to be a game of fact or fiction before we jump right into the topic of today. So I'm going to ask you a question, okay?
Okay.
This is going to be a beauty-related statement. So you're going to tell me if it's fact or fiction.
Oh, my.
Okay. So the first one, you should wash your face with hot water to open up your pores. Is that fact or is that fiction?
Hot water to open up your pores. No, hot water would close your pores, wouldn't it? Oh, wait. Cold opens? I don't know. Fact.
That one's actually fiction. Okay, but it's not because of the reason that you named them.
Okay.
It's actually fiction because the pores themselves don't open or close. Which is a shocker, right? I know.
I'm leaving.
It's like everything we have ever learned. So the pore themselves doesn't open or close, but what it can become is more visible or less visible depending upon how clogged they are. So while hot water itself doesn't open the pore, what it does do is that it can kind of clear some of the gunk, some of the oils, some of all of that stuff. And so it will make the pores become a bit more visible.
I think my whole life is just changed.
I know. Okay, I'm going to give you one that's a little bit easier.
Okay, all right, another one. I'm ready.
Okay, so this one. Sleeping in makeup can speed up skin aging. Is that fact or fiction?
Fact.
That is a fact.
Okay,
right?
yes.
Okay, so makeup, dirt, oil, it can actually break down collagen, leading to premature aging. What's so funny about that one is like around the age 25, we start losing collagen. So it's like, I'm not trying to do anything to be speeding up.
Yes.
Collagen loss.
That's right.
Because I'm already trying
for those of us who are 29.
For those of, oh my God, I am not. No. I'm not.
Just saying.
But I'm just saying, I am trying to reverse the signs of aging. So I'm going to give you one more. This one's actually fun. This is fun. So this one is, it's another beauty question. Okay, so red lipstick was once banned because people thought it was witchcraft.
Yes, fact.
That is a fact.
Yes,
That's
I just
crazy.
Learned that.
And look at Miss Tina over there with her red lipstick on. Fact. So in the 1700s, England actually nearly banned red lipstick altogether, believing that it had the power to seduce men unnaturally. Is that true?
Still works.
Are the men seduced by red lipstick?
Still works. No, it still works. Does it work? It works.
So that was super cute. I want to have, and also before we hop into our topic, I want to ask you a question. I'm curious about. So I'll give you a few minutes to process. I'm curious about what are you happiest about right now?
I got a dog last year.
Okay.
And my children are grown, and I always told, they're actually mad at me right now. I have 3 boys. And I always told them when I got a house, because we lived in a condo, when I got a house with a bigger yard, that I would get a dog. Well, I didn't get a house with a bigger yard until they moved out.
Oh, so they didn't get to
experience the dog. So his name is Max, and he is absolutely incredible. He's a 100-pound lab shepherd mix, so he's a dog's dog. He's got this huge bark, and so I'm learning how to train him and go on walks. That's what it really, like, I will change my travel schedule so that I can be home at night because I want to make sure that I spend time with my dog.
Wow.
No cap on that, for real. I'm like, yep, I'm going home.
And I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
Dogs are not my ministry, but I wish, if you're listening, I wish you could see her face. She is so excited about this dog. I'm so happy. Okay, so shout out to Max. Shout out to Max. All right, so I want to kind of jump into this concept of imposter syndrome. To be very honest, I know that you have some very you have your own thoughts about imposter syndrome and what that truly is and where that may come from. And I am a person who has often said that I have struggled. I'm pretty sure this conversation is probably going to change my thinking about that, which I hope it does. But I am a person who has felt as though they suffered from imposter syndrome. So this conversation is going to be all about how perceptions of failure can contribute to this phenomenon known as imposter syndrome. And so what are some strategies to reframe and learn from these failures, but also maybe reframe the conversation that we have about ourselves, myself included. So I first want to hear your thoughts on this phenomenon, and I'm going to call it air quote imposter syndrome. But what are your thoughts?
So, in a nutshell, my belief is that imposter syndrome represents a disconnection from our true self. Because when we truly know who we are, and I'll explain that a little bit more, but when we truly know who we are, then it's not that we don't face fear or have doubt. It is that we are anchored and have a foundation that allows us to know that whatever is in front of us, whatever is struggle, challenges going on, that we can make it through, right? And that there's nothing, the other part of that is there's nothing too big for us. Yeah.
So these thoughts are like these feelings of imposter syndrome. I know, at least from my experiences, have often been linked to, maybe childhood conditioning for some individuals, maybe perfectionism for others, or even societal expectations. So, in your experience, can you expound on what are some of the deeper underlying causes? I know you spoke about not necessarily being anchored in your purpose, but can you share a little bit more about that and why it may manifest itself as being attached to perfectionism or childhood conditioning or even traumas that someone in the audience may have experienced?
Yeah. So I think what happens, and this happens to all of us, is that we come, we're born and we're given a name and we're given an identity, we're given a story. And our parents, well-meaning in most cases, right, see us as an extension of themselves. After I had my children, I had to reckon with the fact that God doesn't have any grandchildren. Like, we're all children of God. And so each one of us has a soul, and each one of us has a soul's purpose. And so our parents oftentimes tell us they're the first identity shaper, right? You can be anything you want to be. You can do anything you want to do. That's true when you're walking in your purpose. But so that's our first identity shaper. And then we go to school and we experience society's expectations of like who we should be and how we should show up in the world. And very rarely in our what we call our formative years does anyone ask us who we think we are.
Right. It's like you're going to be who I say you're going to be until you get old enough to decide for yourself.
Well-meaning. And then sometimes we experience traumas, right, that shape our identity, right, that tell us that we're nothing, or that we're worthless, or that we should act this way or behave this way. And so we go through probably the first 15 years of our life not really questioning and having the support to question who we are as what I call a child of God. And I know that sometimes that word is triggering for people. And when I say God, I'm not talking about a man out there sitting on a throne. I'm talking about what is actually breathing me right now. And so when we have that experience, we get into our teenage years and then we rebel against it because we know like something's not right. Like and it may be a huge rebellion, like what I did. It might be a light rebellion, right? But there's some kind of pushback that is natural for us. And so in adulthood is really when we have an opportunity to shape our narrative, but we haven't been given the tools.
Right. So it's like we're trying to unlearn and unbecome, but we just don't have the resources really to do that.
And every child, I'll say most children want to please their family. right? They want to because their family has been the source of constant support, right? Constant love. There's a constancy in that. And so we want to live up to that. But oftentimes it's not who our parent, well-meaning, loving, kind parents, right? It's not who we are. It's not who we came to be. And when we're raised by people who haven't found themselves and don't know their purpose, then it just kind of gets passed on. And so when we get into the workplace and we've been told the story, you can be anything you want to be. You can be great. You're great. Like, you're a child of God. You're everything. But we don't know who we are. We show up and we're like, okay, I'm not certain that I can do this.
Right. And there's that duality of self-doubt, but also feeling confident in other spaces at the same time. And you spoke about the workplace and how some of these childhood traumas, perhaps the way that we were raised and this lack of resources, can manifest itself in the way that we show up in certain spaces, particularly at work. I am a person who I decently feel confident. I felt like I was confident until I got to work. And I don't mean this work. I mean my work, my day job. And so I'm like, wait a minute. Is this even a space for me? You know, do I belong here? And so I'm in this space of trying to navigate the appearance of being outwardly successful, but still in some ways feeling fraudulent or feeling like a fraud. Like, is this the space or the place for me?
Well, I think one of the things that what I suggest we do is just accept where we are. Don't do battle with it, right? And not become a victim to it, but just say, okay, I believe in the perfection of my life. And no matter what the journey is, no matter how I got here, I am here now. And this is where I'm supposed to be. And then start from that place instead of trying to go back and, I say, litigate. You know, my mother and I have a running joke where every time I come across something in my life that's hard, my dad has passed away. So I call her and I'm like, okay, pull out your list. I need to blame you for this. You did not prepare me for this, right? She's like, hold on, we're on number 75, right?
That's how it feels.
But when you get into the space where you feel like, oh my goodness, what am I doing here? I don't feel like this is a fit for me, or I don't feel like I can do this. That's a perfect place to start.
But how can we reclaim that space without feeling a constant need to prove that we belong? How do we do that? Because I mean, it's real. You know, you walk into meetings, you walk into certain spaces. I think particularly for me as a woman of color, you know, an African-American woman in particular, I would probably say, an earlier stage executive at work, I would say, how do you try to reclaim that, but not feel a need to constantly have to prove in a world and in an industry where people are constantly making you feel as though you don't deserve or you should not be, or it's not your time, right?
Yeah.
It's not your time. Like, how did you do that? Like,
Exactly.
You're
too
only
young.
this, you're too young, and you're too this, and how did you get here? Or this other person should have gotten here before you did. Like, how do you that? Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Cut. That is the space that I'm in right now. So I'm asking for me.
For you. Okay.
I care about y'all.
All right. Everybody else, this is not for you. Stop listening. This is for her. We'll be back in just a moment. So there's a narrative in your head, right, that has been formed that you're aware of in that space more so than in other spaces where you feel safe and feel comfortable and feel confident, right? And so that narrative that's in your head, you've got to replace that with a new narrative. And it sounds simple. It sounds easy, like, oh, just tell yourself something different. But what happens to us is that narrative is so strong and it shapes our identity that it really is about creating a new identity for yourself that isn't based on, my good girlfriend says, you eat the meat and spit out the bone. Like, take the good stuff and spit out the stuff that you don't want. And so as an adult, you get to decide who you want to be. You I love the memes that go around that are like, do you know you can have birthday cake any day of the week? Like, you don't have to have it
you don't have
just
to wait
on your
until it's your
birthday.
birthday.
And so one of the ways to do that successfully is therapy, right? To have a listening partner who can help you navigate. Another way is to work internally with your own self-talk, your own affirmations about who you are. And then I think one of the best ways is to find other people who are in that same space, who are working on their level up.
Right.
Right? Because a lot of times what we do when we're successful is we want to hang out with the same people. We want to stay in the same spaces. Like, we want to be, and I think particularly like as Black women, when we blow up and glow up, we want to bring everybody with us. But everybody's not ready. Everybody's not doing the work that you're doing to have the glow up and the blow up. And so environment is stronger than will. And I'm saying this publicly, my children are going to kill me. But when I was raising my boys, I would say, if you and I spend 30 days in a crack house, we will become crackheads. Not because we've ever done, I'm sorry, children, not because we've ever done it before, but because if we're in that environment, we're going to be tempted over and over again. And over time, we're going to be like, oh, well, everybody else is doing it, right? And the same goes for the internal dialogue. If everyone else believes that they're not worthy, like around you, that they can't have, that they're imposters in their space, then it reinforces that. So we've got to find ways to be in relationship with the people who have overcome that or are in the process of overcoming that. So it supports you along your journey. But it's the internal narrative, and it's a tough one.
It is so hard just trying to change what you think about yourself when there are external forces that are trying to change your mind. It's like some days I wake up and I'm like, I'm that girl. Like, I know I'm that girl. Then I get to, and I'm like, wait, hold on. Am I that girl? Like, am I? Like, it's like, you are, but people will see.
Because that's how you were created.
Right.
Right?
In his image. And I know that. And I know that. We know that. I guess it just doesn't stop the feeling from coming. But you're right, it's the internal dialogue. And definitely changing your space and the individuals that you hang around. And people who have gone through and overcome. And just knowing that it's possible to get to the other side. Now, they don't want me to get to the other side, okay? Because when I get to the other side, I'm going to come in there like a force to be reckoned
They
with.
Do, because it's about...
I'm like almost here, then I'm trying to now get to the other side.
It's about your liberation.
Because right now, and it's not linear, right? It's like you get to a good place, the journey is not linear, and then something happens, and then you're pulled back, and so you go from A to D, and then from D back to B, and then from B to H, and then you kind of come back, and it's a back and forth. But I want to talk a little bit about other ways that this may manifest itself, and this is something that I have found myself doing.
Okay.
It's interesting because I don't find myself doing this so much at work as much as I do in my personal life. This idea of playing small, right? And and you actually, so funny. One of the reasons for sure that I knew I had to invite you to the show. So I wanted to have a more private conversation, but as we were leaving off of the stage at this event, the Wealth and Power Conference. Shout out to our colleagues who put on that conference. I'll tag them in the comments below. But you told me when we were getting off the stage, you said you are playing small. We had only met each other for
I have goosebumps.
5 minutes. And getting off of the stage, you said, you are playing small. I need to talk to you. Like, you are playing small. And I know that I'm playing small. And, and I don't know if part of it is a lack of confidence in some areas, but it's strange because like I feel, I don't always feel like there's a lack of confidence, but it's definitely manifesting itself in ways where I may not be fully capitalizing on.
Do you have siblings?
I do.
Okay. Is anyone else in your family as successful as you?
You know what? I have an immediately older sister and she does well. I'm so proud of her.
But is she, and I love you, older sister. I don't know who you are. I'm asking out of curiosity. So a lot of times for us, and Gay Hendricks wrote the book, The Big Leap.
The Big Leap.
And I got a chance to study with him.
Okay.
And he talks about a couple of different ways that we self-sabotage. And one of the ways is really prevalent for women in particular is that we can't get any bigger than our family of origin because we want to be accepted by them. Like we don't want to blow up and glow up because we don't want to get a big head. I don't know. My parents would tell me, don't get a big head. And when I went to the university,
and while well-meaning,
right, that humility,
it makes us believe that humility is something that it's not.
That's right. That's right.
That's
exactly.
a big one.
Exactly. Humility is knowing your power and your strength and when to use it.
And when to use it, and not using it at all for fear of making other people feel out of place.
Yeah. But a lot of times we play small because we want to stay accepted by our group. Right. And we want to keep those attachments in place because we're afraid that we're going to lose them if we get the big head, if we get bigger than what they think we should be or how they've raised us to be. I will say for myself that as an African-American woman, light skin, red hair, freckles, right? For me, the narrative was, oh, you think you're white, right? And so being smart was being white, being, intelligent and speaking, using the King's English was being white, like all of these things. And so I didn't want to do that.
Right.
Because I wanted to be accepted by my group. And I developed a really deep sense of self-loathing because I couldn't change any. Oh, I could change some of it, right?
Your hair.
But I couldn't change any of this. And so it was, and growing up in even though there was integration, there was still a lot of segregation, right? So growing up in segregated communities where you only lived with a certain group of people. And therefore that was my safety network. So we all have these internal dialogues and internal struggles. And when we face them, like work brings it up for most of us, right? We get into the workplace and we're like, oh, wait a minute. When we face them, I think one of the things that's important, you asked earlier, we also have support. We have divine support. We don't have to do this alone. We're not doing it alone, but we don't have to consciously do this alone.
Right, not consciously.
And we just a little help.
How do you think that we can recognize when we're starting to play small? Because sometimes I feel like we don't even realize that we're playing small and or not performing to our maximum. What are some things or how are some ways that you think that we can begin to recognize that in ourselves?
One of my coaches used to say, notice what you're noticing. Notice what you're noticing. And I know when I'm starting to like shrink in my capacity, I start watching the news. I start watching, I don't do horror movies, but like crime dramas and that sort of thing, because it's that vibration of like fear. And I get interested in it. And so, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. And I know for a fact my money's about to slow down. My relationships are about to like screw up because I've gotten into this vibe of like it. So it feels painful in some way, or we engage in conversations that we're angry more quickly. We're irritated. We're frustrated about things, and it just, you feel it in your body.
Right.
In a lot of ways. And then it shows up for me in like my behaviors. And I have to like turn on meditation. I have to turn on.
Try to reground yourself.
Exactly. Going outside and grounding myself. So I find myself getting smaller, and I find those behaviors for me are like, I start getting interested in crime dramas. I start getting interested in, I may eat more sweets.
Just some of the negative self-behaviors.
Exactly.
And like for me, I feel like it manifests itself in as I'm being reflective. And because this is not something that I recognize in the moment of it happening, but now that we're having this conversation, I can recollect there being things or opportunities that I won't even go after for fear that I would not get them, right? Or I would not, take on new challenges in the event that I could not complete it successfully, because there's this idea of being perfect and being good and being right and overachieving that has really become limiting, like self-limiting behaviors. And I was just recording a video about this earlier, about how this idea of overachieving can lead to self-sabotage, and about how there is truly a dark side of always trying to be perfect, of always trying to do things the right way and impress other people. But one of my colleagues, so I'm an epidemiologist by training.
Yes.
And so one of my colleagues, I'm calling him a colleague, but he's probably not even my direct colleague. Like, that's how big he is. But Dr. Peter Hotez, I follow him a lot. He was a lot over all the media during COVID. And I was going after this program. And in this particular program, you had to be nominated by an individual who was already in the organization. And so he was going to nominate me. And so one of the things he told me was, do not be upset if you don't get it. And he said, my list of failures is so much longer than the list of things that I actually achieved. But if you just don't try, you know the answer. You're not going to get it.
It's
but
over.
If you at least try, there's at least this 50-50 chance, right? That it could either go your way or not. And to not be upset if it does not work out in your favor. And that was game changing for me. And I think it goes back to you saying surrounding yourself with people who've either been through it or are out of that, because hearing someone who's so accomplished, who is doing a lot of the things that I want to do, say, there are so many things that I did not get, that I tried to get, and how long the list of things were that he failed at, was just something that was insightful for me to hear, because I can feel myself at times not pursuing opportunities or things that in my mind will not result in success, because I've told myself that being perfect and achieving certain things, I've almost made it be attached to my self-worth in a way. Now that I'm thinking about this now out loud. This is therapy. I'm thinking about it now out loud, that I've obviously attached some of these things to my sense of self-worth.
What I will say is that oftentimes we misdefine things, right? We misdefine words and we misdefine concepts. And what I love about being a grown woman is that I get to define for myself who I am. Like, I get to take my own power back from those definitions and say, this is who I am and this is what I mean to the world and what I want to be. So this idea of perfectionism is a form of self-punishment. It's a narrative that if I don't do it the way somebody else who God designed different on purpose, right? If I don't do it exactly the way they do it, and if my result isn't exactly what their result is, then I have to self-sabotage myself. I have to tell myself that I'm bad, I'm wrong, like all of those. I call them, they're just, they're the icks in our heads.
Right. And even if you're not telling yourself those things, you're creating situations that don't tell you different.
Exactly. Right. It's like, okay.
Because I don't have to look in the mirror and say, girl, you're not worth it. But I'm creating situations that are not telling me the opposite.
And that's how you know as well.
And that's how you know.
Right.
So 2023, I'll talk a little bit. I'm going to go back to 2023. This is so funny. So I was working during the day, trying to move up in my career, had gotten promoted. That was one of the first times I got promoted in 2023. I was all at the same time. I was working during the day. I was working my business, Artistry by Zuri. That is my beauty business at night. I would leave my beauty business and I would go back to work because I was working on my dissertation at the same time. Okay. And with this, I was planning an annual conference that I do for permanent makeup. Yeah. And so I'm not really sure now that I think back on it what led me to do all of these things at the same time? But I realize now, particularly I think as it relates to the conference, because when I look at a list of these things that I'm doing and what is the most optional, that is one.
Right.
I did not even have to put myself in that situation, but I think it was this fear of, well, if I don't do it, what will it look like to other people, right? If I don't still put this event on, if I don't still do this, even though I know that I am stretched super thin. So 2023, I did not really realize this at the time until someone, and I'm going to say adjacent to me in terms of they were not a family member, right? This is a person who I knew and I knew them well, but they were not a family member, people who see me every day, all day. Right. And so she told me, she said, there is something wrong here. She said, I see you doing this class or teaching this class. It was like on the weekend at the salon. And she said, but it's like you're not really here. Like, what? She's like, there's something going on. Like, do you even want to be doing this? And I'm like, girl, what are you talking about, girl? Girl, yes, I want to be doing this. What are you talking about? But it actually took someone almost on the outside to look at me and say, and so after that, I succumbed to like what I feel like now was just this depressed state. Okay. So now I'm trying to reconcile what she's telling me versus this, no, I'm a hustler. I'm grinding. I'm doing these things. And
we got to give that up.
Yeah, right.
We got to give up the hustle culture.
Right. We got to give up. So now I'm operating in this grace over grind situation and allowing myself to have, but that is the space that I was in. And it was almost like.
So you've reclaimed it.
Yeah. Now in 2025. Right. But see, 2023, I spent the last half of 2023 just extremely depressed. And even when I would sit down and try to pray about it, I was so distracted in my mind with everything going on and so overwhelmed, I couldn't even start the prayer without something else popping up in my mind. And I didn't, at the time, I'm thinking, well, this is the cost if you want to be here. This is what it is.
For the hustle culture. This is what it takes.
This is the hustle.
Yeah.
Yes. And I've been guilty of saying, like, this is the hustle culture. This is what it takes. Like, this is what you have to do. You're going to have to wake up earlier, go to sleep late at night. And at least this is what I told myself.
So I will use a story that I, as Christians, we all know, and I may get it wrong, so forgive me. Don't be putting in the comments.
I'll get the gist.
Right, but somebody will tell me.
You know they will.
But they talked about in Genesis how the world was created, and the first day, the second day, the third day, the fourth day, and was it the sixth day that God created man? The sixth day, God created man.
It was one of the seven, and I would beg to argue it was 5 through 7, more than 1 through 3.
Right. Okay, we got it.
It was in that week.
It was a number. It was in that week. Okay, we got it in that week. But it was the sixth day. And on the seventh day, God rested. So the first experience of that humanity has of God, is of what? Of rest. And so there's revolution in that, and there's restoration in that. And that is a pattern, I believe, that we who are believers in the faith, right? And those who don't believe in the Christian tradition, there is so much science and so much storytelling around the power of rest. But our first experience with our Creator, right, was the experience of rest. And so it goes against this idea of always being busy, always hustling, always like moving about.
Like making the stillness feeling uncomfortable.
Exactly.
And unfamiliar.
Exactly. But if we practice that in that faith,
right,
that is the first act that we step into in terms of our awareness and knowingness of this divine presence. And so there's something to that, I think, for all of us, that in order to be successful. So I love what you said about your colleague who talked about the failures, right? Because yes, a list of long failures that most successful people experience, all I would say, before they get to, this overnight sensation. Right. It took them 30 years to get there. But also I think it's really important, particularly as Black women, We come out, African-American women in this country, we come out of a trauma of slavery that did not allow for an appreciation of our bodies, of our health, of our mental health, of our emotions. And we were not only taking care of our families, but we were taking care of other people's families. And so when did we rest?
Right.
And so it's kind of, you've heard of epigenetics. It's
Yeah.
kind of built
It's in our DNA.
It's in our DNA.
It's in our DNA.
And so one of the things I think that we can do to redefine success, this is about taking back those definitions and really creating your own definition of what success is. I think it has to include rest.
And for me, I think now in 2025, and now I'm on the other side of those feelings of overwhelm, anxiety, depression, I have become so fragile and so careful with myself.
Yeah.
To where it's like,
so good.
I'm so fragile that I am just not allowing anything to put me back in the space that I was in 2023, that I thought this is the way that it was supposed to go. But now I'm just trying so hard. So it's like, I cannot do that. I won't do that.
No is a powerful word.
And it has a period. And I'm not even, because I am trying so hard not to be back in that space, because I realize how fragile I am in terms of still battling this duality of, wanting to be perfect and and trying to be confident at the same time. And then me being a woman, again, in the sciences, it's hard because that's not a space where you can always exist.
There's no value there in that way.
Right. So it's like every day I'm showing up as like the resident young Black girl, bringing the value to the table so that everybody can see.
Right.
But that feels daunting to do. And it's pressure to do. But I'm actually coming through on the other side of that, and it has been quite positive for me thus far. I mean, it is only February. It is only February 2nd.
Yeah,
it's only February 2nd of 2025. So I've had 32 days, 33 days.
You've got this. What I will say to that is congratulations, right?
Thank you.
For the recognition of what you've been telling yourself and how you've been, I call it our behaviors, right? Like how we behave, how we act. Here's what I'll say is that I think it's really important to recognize that story of depression, right, is meant for you to transcend because it's a gift to someone else. And so don't struggle with it anymore. I just led a class last week, and we were talking about feeling stuck, right? And how we get out of that feeling of stuckness. And one of the things that I offered is that we surrender to whatever the story is, because that story has come to give us a gift. That struggle, that stuckness has come to give us a gift. And so sit that depression down and ask it, what have you come to bring me?
Right.
What have you come to give me? Because it will stay until it gives you the lesson or the gift that it's here to give you. And the same with the feelings of imposter syndrome, the guilt, the shame, the struggle, the fight for glory or recognition or acceptance, right? There's a feeling that is inside of you that is contained by a story. Like that feeling is inside that story. There's a story that built that. There's a reason why we feel the way we feel. And there's a story that informs that. And so take the time to sit those stories down and say, okay, tell me instead of me going into depression, instead of me beating up on myself and feeling bad about myself, what do you have to tell me? What do you have to share with me? Give it to me and then let me release it. Thank you. Thank you for giving me that. Thank you for blessing me with that. And let it go.
And let it go. I want you to know if you could speak to your younger self. Okay. So thinking back with all of your experiences, the version of you who may have once felt unworthy, out of place, or undeserving, what would you tell yourself now that you did not know at the time?
I didn't know to be gentle with myself. I thought I had to do battle with who I was. I thought I was wrong. I thought there was something wrong with me because I thought and felt so differently. And I didn't know how to honor that part of me. I didn't know how to allow that part of me to exist. I wanted to stuff it down because it didn't look like what my parents wanted, what society wanted, like what the world wanted. It looked like me. And I didn't know who I was. And so I would just say to that little girl, that young woman, be gentle with yourself. Right? And don't be afraid to love. Love was a weakness when I was growing up. You had to be tough and strong and fierce and smart, but to show love and to show compassion was a weakness. You had to always protect yourself. And I don't need protection. That I am safe. That was one of probably the hardest things that I learned, is that no matter where I was on the planet, I'm safe. I'm good. That doesn't mean that I'm not conscious of my surroundings and things that are going on and that sort of thing. But inside of me, I'm safe. And then the other thing is to develop my intuition, because my intuition is a direct connection to divine intelligence, right? And it just makes perfect sense to me, not to be going off of what everybody else says or even what I think, but to check in with God and say, okay, now what do you think about this?
Which is so funny because for some people, that's like the last thing that we do and not necessarily the first, right? Because we become so self-reliant that we almost forget that it's not us that are in control of our situations and our circumstances. So we almost sometimes, and I've been guilty of this, you pray as a last resort and not a first. Just
like,
because,
I got this. And
well,
it helped.
but when you're right, because now I'm drowning, because you grow up doing things and taking care of things on your own, or at least feeling like you're taking care of things on your own, and now sometimes prayer becomes the last thing that we do instead of the first.
And I think, to me, what has become just as important as prayer is meditation. Because prayer is like my conversation. I'm like, okay, JC, what's up? What are we doing today? What you got for me?
JC.
JC.
Big G.
Big G. Divine Mother.
Exactly.
I'm in conversation. But meditation is where I sit and I'm still and I'm listening for.
Listening for.
The divine touch, the divine feel, the divine sound. And, I didn't grow up in a family of meditators. I learned in my 40s that my father, which was why he was so different and so instrumental in my religious upbringing, that his brother-in-law lived in India and practiced transcendental meditation. And so he taught that to my dad. And now, like, as an adult, I make the connection, but I didn't know that growing up. And so we didn't sit down as a family to meditate together, but my children and I did. Right. And I just think that prayer is an amazing way to stay connected, but meditation is like a balm for the soul.
I was listening to my podcast. I'm doing the Daily Bible in a Year podcast.
Okay, yes.
And it spoke about the hardest day to pray is the day after you don't do it. And I was like, isn't that true? So just trying to make, prayer and meditation just a daily part of your wellness and your being. I know it almost sounds like duh, but in the hustle of things, you may give your micro prayers throughout the day, but really sitting down and praying and trying to meditate is something that we have got to. And my theme of 2025 is like romanticizing my life. Everything that feels good and perfect for me is what I am going to be trying to do. And I've definitely tried to
let's change that.
Okay.
Not what I'm trying to do. What I am doing.
What I am doing.
Yes. Because trying, you know what trying looks like. Yeah, trying is like, I'm going to try to pick up this book.
Right. I'm doing.
Yes.
I'm doing.
I'm picking up the book.
I'm doing.
Yeah. And when you are creating,
Mm-hmm.
and this is for all of us, when we're creating, our words matter.
Yeah, that is true.
Our words have power.
That is true.
And so notice what you're noticing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you one final question
Yes.
before we stop. And my question is going to be, do you have any good book recommendations for our audience? I'm going to tell you which one you cannot recommend.
Okay.
Because you recommended this book
Oh, which one?
at the Wealth and Power Conference. Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office.
Oh, I don't think that was me. I don't know.
Yes.
No.
You noted that book?
Mm-mm.
Okay, maybe it wasn't you then.
Mm-mm.
Okay, well, give me a book recommendation.
But I need to
then.
read that one then.
Oh, it is a
It's
good
good?
one. It was a good one. That is a good one.
Okay.
Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office. That is a good one. So give me your top book recommendation right now.
That's so good. I think my top book recommendation right now is The Magician's Way.
The Magician's Way.
By William Whitecloud.
By William White. Last name?
Whitecloud.
Whitecloud. The Magician's Way. Okay. And what is that book going to tell us?
It's going to teach us how to get out of our swing circle.
Okay.
In the beginning of the book, there's a golf lesson.
Okay.
And you could just read that golf lesson and get what you need out of it. But it teaches us how to get out of the habits of thinking.
Okay.
Yeah. And go for our natural ability, which is our genius.
The Magician's Way.
Yeah.
Okay. I really cannot wait to dive into that book. This has been a great conversation with you.
Thank you.
I'm so happy you took the time to come down from Austin to have a conversation with us.
Absolutely.
And I know that the audience will really appreciate this conversation. I know on your website you describe yourself as a coach, but it's more about trying to help individuals get in alignment with their purpose. And you have a number of programs, I'll say, not coaching programs, alignment programs that our audience can take advantage of. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So sacred alignment. My life's work at this point is about tapping into the divine the gifts that we've been given, and having those show up at work.
Okay.
So that there is no more imposter syndrome, that people are living from their genius and from their gifts. And so we have a whole slew of programs to lift leaders. I'm particularly interested in working with business owners and C-suite executives, people who influence large groups of people, to support them in creating joyous and profitable enterprises.
Well, there you are. That is definitely something that I need. I'm sure some of our audience needs. And so I'll make sure to drop down in the comments and talk a little bit more about the programming that you have. So thank you so much for coming. This has been wonderful. So guys, as you know, this is the Beauty and Brains podcast, where we talk about the intersection of beauty, wellness, science, and health. This podcast is brought to you by Artistry by Zuri. Our audio visual is Sacred Stone Media and Productions, produced by TB, the brand strategist. Thank you.